Je souhaiterais tout d'abord remercier les organisateurs de nous avoir donné l'opportunité de participer à cette réunion.
I would like to thank the organizing committee for having participated in organizing this meeting, and I asked my colleagues, given that we have such little time, after a sequence of conferences and many sessions, I'd like to enhance 4 main elements. It seems that it is most important is the enthusiasm about the leader initiative by all the players, be it the old or new legs. Everyone appreciates the quality of this instrument, even though it is a critical one. It is subject to criticism. We should not idealize it, and it's certainly a translation of recognizing the pertinence of the bottom-up initiative, which is one of its main traits. The second has to do with diversity of diversities carried out in the framework of GALs, of legs. This flexibility is absolutely crucial to lead the process of local development, which are ever adapting. The third aspect has to do with placing the players in a setting of network. We heard at level local, regional, and international levels, and to understand others and with others, but to be more confident and trust our own ideas much more. So this underlining of placing everything in the framework of network takes me to the last point, to work for an international organization which works in the Mediterranean area and the area of rural development and agriculture. It is true. I can only imagine the mutual benefit that can come from this opening of the leader dynamic to third countries outside of the EU. And if leader plays a first level role at European level, perhaps it can also be an instrument of international cooperation for Europe. Thank you. And now I'll give the floor to my colleague.
Paulo César, do Brasil.
I am Paulo César from Brazil. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for the opportunity and for the learning that I've received from these 2 days, which will certainly improve the work that I've been carrying out in Brazil. My final reflection is beyond the virtues and the learnings that we have always valued regarding leader approach, on which you are, of course, the major players, and in practical terms, you were the ones who kept on building it and providing a new body for this successful approach. Nevertheless, it also entails change. And a new design is required for these new phases. And this design certainly should bring about changes in the rules of the game, and this in turn brings about changes in the players' behavior, which in turn cannot be foreseeable, as it will be different from country to country according to the specificities of each country. Therefore, the innovation, in my opinion, and I'm referring strictly to the construction of the National Plan for Rural Development, or even for regional plans, which are guidelines for the local actions. It has a potential to bring about articulation and synergies at a vertical level, which comes from the scale of European Union until the local scale, and this is a potential requiring more development, and which also values a common aspect of leader approach, and this is the bottom-up perspective, in this case with principles that also involve top-down approaches. So one has to adapt and articulate these both approaches. Nevertheless, as a potential, I can also see that it seeks to incorporate in public policies for each country these approaches, these learnings, these guidelines, and the values and principles which guide the approach. These have the possibility of being incorporated more precisely as state policies. This is an aspect that should be looked at again as a result, as adding value to what you have built within the leader approach. But we see that it also brings challenges regarding change, less foreseeable changing in behavior from the key players, and also it also requires from local actors to change their behavior, and therefore local local lags may fear the change, and this what you have to do. You have to mobilize energy, you have to mobilize social capital built in the last few years in order for this potential, the potential of vertical articulation of the whole of the local actions throughout the development of rural areas of each country to be considered as a positive thing and not a drawback within the leader policy. So this is the message. In my opinion, you all should face this challenge. It is your responsibility before the rest of the world, because everyone is following this experience. Everyone is nurturing based on this experience. So you have a social and political commitment that you have to deal with, and this will certainly bring results to the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
My comments are indeed based on my observations while being here with you. As we said earlier, each rural place is unique. If you've seen one rural community, you've seen one rural community. Therefore, it follows that if you've seen one lag, you've seen one lag. Diversity among and between lags is thus a fundamental characteristic of leader and must be accepted as a fundamental attribute of the program as leader is mainstreamed. Okay, second comment. If a rural community with a depressed economy is to find new economic engines, it must invest in and find unused assets, human capital, social capital, natural capital, human-created capital, that can be exploited for profit by private individuals. Empowering private action by private individuals depends on the public empowerment of individuals and the expansion of the opportunities available to them by investments in the public good assets of the community. The public good attributes are important. But sometimes that's still not enough. Private economic actions of private individuals requires that they be able to amass the capital that is required to exploit the new opportunities created. That's the banking credit function, and it should be addressed by leader lags, though not by direct grants to individual entrepreneurs. When an idea is not bankable, it is not necessarily a problem with the idea. As the Danes pointed out, The bankers are not the brainiest of people. Rather than giving direct grants to private individuals, there are in any rural place more than a few worthy individuals in private enterprises, and choosing between them is a treacherous process. Approaches to enhancing credit for small and medium enterprises, SMEs, would be preferred. Microcredit institutions and credit access programs come to mind, but LAGs should not likely substitute for either banks or equity investors. Bankers can be educated, perhaps by including them in some of the business networks, particularly in the transnational networks. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to be here and to provide feedback on what we've learned the past 2 days. It's been quite hard work, but I'm very pleased to notice that most of the issues that we say here, or key messages that we would like to transfer to you, resonates from the mini plenary sessions, and I'm sure it will resonate from the EU eyes as well. So I think that integrated approach and a common vision towards not overlapping or saying redundant things, but putting our issues on the table as they appear is quite important. It's been quite fruitful and a very worthwhile experience so far. Let's start with the first thing. I think it's a very good idea to have external non-EU people as eyes. I view that as quite an innovative thing, something that I haven't seen for quite a while, and I hope you continue with this. Mutual learning, mutual understanding, sharing of knowledge, etc., brings new perspectives. A very important component of that is new perspectives in terms of the developing world. Remember, you're not the only people in the world that has to do rural development. So let's put some context on developing and developed. You are all in a developed environment. We are coming, except you, from a developing environment. But there's many issues that's quite similar to these areas. Issues of infrastructure, issues of ICTs, broad-based economic development, investment in the developed sense, foreign direct investment is preferred, empowerment, human capital, financial capital, value adding, especially workforce demographics that includes gender, etc. So these are common issues that we're looking at. But if one thinks of the developing environment, those issues are exacerbated by things like disease, by history, by wars, by land reform, and the fact that agriculture in the developing world is still regarded as the major economic base. So I think there's much that we can learn from each other. And those issues are similar, and let's build on them. That brings me to the first of 4 key messages that I would like to convey to you. Let's call the first one a learning approach. And this comes directly from this context of developed and developing and external people. If you have transnational projects that you learn from, a suggestion is to learn from the developed world as well. So have exchanges with developing countries because the issues are similar. So there's many projects in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, I think, which can learn from you, but also on some issues that you might find useful from what you're learning from them. So again, there's mutual learning, knowledge sharing, and understanding. In the African sense, I just have to mention, you all know NEPAD, the New Economic Plan for Africa's Development, the movement towards the African Union, not quite similar to the EU, but in terms of harmonization, integration of the continent. And in South Africa, there's good examples of community-based organizations, self-help groups. I think those are platforms that one can look at. So the first one, a learning approach, would be preferable between developed and developing countries. The second one is partnerships, and that's nothing new, and I think you know what it's about and what the value is. But something to mention and to remember is that partnerships should be mutually beneficial. And there's some cases where I have seen where partnerships, especially in terms of your service providers in your areas and your lags, is not that beneficial. There's a quality control problem, and it's not usually based on synergies or mutual synergies. Remember also, it's not easy, partnership component. It needs a substantial investment of personal time and personal energy. And that's sometimes something that we forget. We take partnerships as granted. So in terms of the quality of service providers, that's important. Also remember, LEADER will not always be there. There will not always be this very efficient and easy funding that's there to base programs and projects on. But I think the lasting mechanism will be the partnership mechanism that will see this through into longer-term sustainability. The third one, key message, is monitoring and evaluation. It's been mentioned many times, but it's not very easy to see what the true impact of your myriad of activities are. One would like to see long-term economic impact. There's lots of projects, there's lots of activity, and issues that we've discussed among ourselves as well is perhaps building additional capacity either inside the lag, but preferably from an outside point of view, to look at that economic contribution that your efforts makes. So the issue of monitoring evaluation is very important. And the last one, perhaps most important one, is upscaling, upscaling, upscaling. You've had 15 years with a lot of trial and retribution and learning processes. But it's still very much at a project level. And one would prefer seeing an upscaling approach towards broader-based economic development. Linking the projects into a programmatic approach, for instance. Looking at longer-term sustainability and using the economy as the driver. That capacity building process has happened, lots of training has taken place, but in terms of upscaling, I think that's time for it now. Thank you once again for the opportunity, and I wish all of you quite well.
Thank you. Thank you for your very interesting perspective. In a global world, I am sure LEADER is a global tool for rural development. And now, after the 4 external observers, we are the 4 internal observers. Please.
Okay, so I start with the internal EU perspective. And, well, I would like to be very short. I try at least my very best. And, well, we all have seen and listened and heard and know from our own experience the achievements and the potentials of LEADER, of the LEADER method. And, well, what I would like to highlight in order to maintain this potential in the next period during the mainstreaming, I would like to focus on some aspects regarding the framework. The LEADER groups, the LAGs, they need a certain framework in order to realize their potential. And one important thing which I would like to address to national and EU authorities is that keep the autonomy at the local level. Means keep the autonomy of decision making, of defining the territory, of developing the strategy to the local level, and the one thing, and the other thing is ensure the quality in terms of setting standards and giving assistance and accompanying the LAGs during the process to ensure quality in the delivery of the development strategy. And one last thing is keep it simple, as said by one LAG yesterday, which want to keep their work simple for their members and for the local actors. I think also from the national administrative units, authorities, and from EU, keep it simple for the LAGs, as simple as possible, and make the administrative burden a little smaller than it is right now. Okay, and then another point I would like to know, this autonomy for the lakes is also some kind of responsibility for the lakes as they deal with public money. They have to do some kind of public job for everybody, for the region, which means for the lakes they have the responsibility to create transparency, to bring to known to everybody what they are doing and how they are doing, and they have to have some kind of accountability. And they have to look. It's in several regions. That's not to enter into parallel structures, the local authorities, administration, and the LAG. That there's this my English is not that good. Legitimacy and legitimation that you cooperate really with the elected structures and you're not playing a part. So that's more or less in some key words, very short. I think you all know what's behind it. Thank you.
Boa tarde a todos. Eu vou ser extremamente breve.
I'll be extremely brief. Besides thanking the organization of this conference to be able to be here, which is a great honor, I will be as brief as I can possibly be. I think that this conference really shows what is the great legacy of the leader approach, or the thinking of the planning at local level. The majority of the cases in which I had the opportunity to participate in the panels do show that planning is not something that one can learn from books, from manuals, that go through SWOT analysis very well done, and objectives that are very well designed. Planning is a process. It lives on a daily basis. It unfolds on a daily basis. And of the capacity of local action groups to mobilize, to contribute, to then implement at local level good projects, good partnerships. I think that the leader experience really shows, above all, that planning is like an aircraft, this extraordinary machine that deals with instability. It is designed to deal with instability, and that which leader has, one of the most positive aspects of leader amongst many, and I don't want to go on forever, is to show that planning at local level is indeed, it's not just having preconceived ideas and to have a starting point that is very well planned. No, it lives from the very process of the daily life. In the framework of many plenary sessions, we could identify very interesting projects. I won't mention them specifically. I will just call your attention to the following. We could observe that we have excellent projects of cooperation. It is possible to have good cooperation projects, and we have quite a few good examples that we have seen in this conference. Secondly, it was also possible to identify that leader has the capacity in developing that which I call second-level projects, that is, to be the leverage that in and of themselves integrate the 7 principles of leaders, projects that have the capacity to set up partnerships, to call in the banking sector, to finance private projects. So leaders shows to has the capacity to reproduce itself, and and in passing on to the promoters the principles that are underlying to itself. I would like to manifest my solidarity to what our colleague from South Africa said, mentioning the importance of evaluation. I was very pleased indeed with the fact, thank you, Michael, with the fact that it's common throughout Europe to have self-evaluation in terms of local action groups. This is very important, that I would like to underline the need to make self-assessment of our work, even in the logic or criteria of planning as a process. So it's a continuum of ever-growing improvement. Thank you.
Dear friends, should ever you forget everything what happened here between us, among us, I want you to keep in mind at least one letter, the first letter of the word leader, which means liaison, linkage. It's a very short way to understand what leader is. It creates, it shapes, it lets us understand linkages.